Ready to go?
Yes. We have a clicker? Yes. Oh, okay.
I call this meeting of the Electoral Board to order. If you would all please rise for a moment of silence and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you all very much for being here. So the first item of business on the agenda is the approval of minutes for our last meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have minutes for the August 22nd, 2024 meeting. Only two signatures are on here because we only have two board members present. This constitutes a quorum, so we can proceed with business. There's a notice in the minutes that Lieutenant General Mark Dillon submitted his resignation at the last meeting. So I offer these.
All right, so I will second that. And all in favor say aye.
Aye.
So for those of you who don't know, Mark and his family have moved to South Carolina. So he resigned at the last electoral board meeting. So I understand the wheels are in process for the Republicans to nominate another board member to take his place. And that person will be, of course, appointed by the circuit court. So, we are all expecting that will happen soon, and that we will have a full three-person board by election day. So that's where we are with that. All right. Report from electoral board members. London, do you have anything?
Mr. Chairman, just briefly, let me say that now that our election day has evolved into an election season, the entire process has come under tighter scrutiny. And anybody involved in the process is subject to strict scrutiny, more strict scrutiny than ever before. The general election coming up appears to have triggered the attention of the general public, concerned citizens, and the world at large. Our general registrar is getting complaints, suggestions as to how to do his job better, and other interference. The board is short-handed. We are missing that our general registrar has not missed a deadline or failed to perform any performance functions, and his staff continues to perform above and beyond the call of duty. So I want to congratulate Eric for the job that he's doing. He's running a tight ship. He's keeping everything under control. Every time a fire comes up, it's put out promptly. De minimis interference and no errors. So I just want to commend Eric and the staff at this point in history. This is going to be a historic time. This is a historic election. We're all actors in a historic drama right now. So we have to watch our P's and Q's, dot all the T's and dot all the I's and cross all the T's. So thank you very much. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Let me associate myself with those remarks, and one other comment I would make is when I hear from people, a lot of times they're watching CNN or they're watching social media. Did you hear what they're doing in Georgia? Or did you hear what they're doing in Arizona? They're purging, hundreds of thousands of people, and I always tell them, focus on what we control here in Virginia. And there are lawsuits all over the country, mostly brought by the Republican Party, challenging various parts of the elections being conducted in those states. And those lawsuits, I assume, will probably continue. The good news is I'm not aware of any lawsuits in Virginia challenging any of the processes that we have. In fact, as most of you know, several weeks ago, the governor issued an executive order basically outlining all of the steps that we're taking here in Virginia to make sure this is a fair and open and accurate and transparent election. He went down the list: paper ballots, voting equipment that's not connected to the internet or anybody else's websites, double and triple checking the results, training the election officers before every election. So he went down the list of everything that we have been doing in Virginia for at least the last 3 or 4 years. The process that resulted in Joe Biden winning Virginia by about 20% in 2020, and then the very next year, Glenn Youngkin being elected governor in Virginia, a Republican, using the same process, the same equipment, same officers. And so I didn't hear any calls for recounts of the 2021 election. So I think we can be proud, in fact, that the rules of the road are clear in Virginia. Everyone is following those. And if there are challenges or changes in process, people can ask questions about that. But I don't think anyone can fundamentally challenge the accuracy and the transparency by which we are conducting elections in Prince William County and in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So yes, it's an historical time, and our goal always is we don't want to be above the fold in the Washington Post. Oh, what happened? Why can't they count the votes in Prince William County? What's wrong here? And that's the goal of every registrar across the country and every electoral board member. We don't want to be the story after the election. And we're very fortunate, I think, with Eric and his team and the way that they're planning and conducting the election. And presidential years are completely different from every other cycle, and we all know that. And so I know that they've ramped up to prepare for the opening of new early voting locations, and then the outpouring of the higher turnout that we're going to have in November. So I think we can be proud of what we're doing in Virginia. So that leads us to the General Registrar's report.
All right, well, let's talk about those preparations and what we are doing for this election, which is, in progress. A lot of our work as we prepare for each election is really in the weeks leading up to now. So a lot of the work to make things successful has been done, and I'd say that, there's always a lot more calls, there's always a lot of voters to handle compared to a regular election, but I think the staff is calm, they're getting the job done, they're doing things efficiently, and we are on good pace right now with no significant problems or issues to report. But I'm going to go through kind of where we're at overall. So in terms of staff task completion, so we added a program called Electask, I think a couple years ago, that tracks all of our tasks. We keep track of about 300 to 350 tasks each election, and staff are assigned to a particular task, and then they're responsible for making sure that task is on time. So tasks are either not completed, in progress, or completed. So right now at this point today, there are 152 tasks that were due by today. 148 of those have been completed, and I've talked to the staff about the few that are not. A couple of them are just things preparing for pre-processing and CAP. We're finalizing some forms and things for that. So those will be done in the next few days. But the mail voting teams had they've had a lot of ballots coming in, they've had a lot of phone calls. So those first couple weeks of mail voting, always a lot of traffic and conversations. We already have 15 future tasks completed. So we are a little ahead of the curve right now in terms of where we're at for election preparation, so that's really good. Thanks thanks to the staff, by the way, for assisting with getting everything set up today. We unfortunately had a storage room back here that got locked somehow from the inside and we cannot get into, so we have, as we often do in elections, improvised, come up with solutions, and looks like we have seating for just about everybody, so we can say the board meeting was a standing room only affair today. So, call tracking of office calls. So I wanted to note that we do track all of our phone calls to the office. So during the presidential, we'll get more complaints, concerns, questions, inquiries. We had about more than 800 phone calls last week. And we're tracking all of them so we see what things people are calling about, what areas they have questions about, what concerns they have that they're reporting to us, what things we need to make modifications to. So far that's been about 40% just questions, general questions about early voting, where it is, when it's happening, hours, all that kind of stuff. That's pretty standard. 30% mail phone calls, questions about, people having questions about how to complete the form or having maybe an issue. Maybe they made a mistake on their ballot or something like that, and talking to the team about that. And then 20% voter registrations. Voter registration really jumped up a couple weeks ago. We always get a ton right before an election, but we've had that really ramped up a little early this year, given that it's a major election. About a dozen of those have been complaints, so we are tracking anything that's a complaint. Some questions, some concerns about the early voting schedule. I'm going to address that in just a little bit here. But all this was really helpful to us to help to identify problems and trends in the future, to see what the concerns are. It's data that we can then share with the board so we can formulate plans for the next election to correct for any issues that we had. We have gotten some really positive feedback about the voter guide. That arrived between the 21st and the 26th for the vast majority of voters. And we've gotten a lot of compliments on that. People said it was very easy to use. The new stickers, people have enjoyed those, including our new stickers for future voters, featured our cartoon cardinal, and a lot of compliments for the officers that are working at the early voting site. Traffic has been steady here, but we certainly have room for more people. So if you want to avoid, lines later on, I would recommend passing the word along to others that there's not much of a line here over the next couple weeks. I think we'll probably have some lines once we get started at all the sites, but so far we haven't had anything really over 15 or 20 minutes on the first day, and after that it's just been kind of a steady stream. So a lot of compliments for the officers and the good work that they're doing assisting voters. Some upcoming things: logic and accuracy testing for Election Day. That starts this week, right? Tomorrow? Okay, that starts tomorrow. Early voting at all sites will start in just a little under 2 weeks on Sunday the 13th. We have 5 additional sites that open up around the county. It's Haymarket Gainesville Library, it's Brentsville Courthouse, the DMV, Verlazo Government Center, and the Dumfries Community Center. Those all open on the 13th, and then they are going to be open just about every day for the next three weeks. So 20 of the last 21 days of early voting, these are open. They are not open on the final Sunday of early voting. That's to give the staff at least one day off over about a 5-week span. So, but we have plenty of opportunities for that.
Well, let me stop there because I think it would be helpful if you explain. So we're not giving, the officers may have the day off, but certainly the staff. So explain what happens between 5 o'clock on Saturday and Sunday and Monday, and then we open the polls on Tuesday. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that people aren't aware of.
So the last Saturday of early voting, staff is there, finishing up that process, closing everything down for all the sites, taking away the equipment, closing them down, all that kind of thing. The main thing on Sunday is once early voting is done, we have to wait till then to prepare the poll books for Election Day. The poll books on Election Day are not connected to the internet, so they need all the latest information from all the early voting sites and mail voting. So we have to prepare those on that Sunday. So that Sunday is actually a very busy day for us. Staff is working. We'll have a lot of staff at our warehouse, getting those poll books ready for Election Day. Monday is then final preparations for Election Day, and dropping off the equipment and the supplies for all the precincts. And then Tuesday is Election Day. So that final weekend, that Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday are all really long days, especially for certain members of the staff. We do try to rotate, some half days and things like that for people, so people are still fresh on Election Day. And then once Election Day is over, well, for the voters, that's the end of it. For me, that's the busiest time then, from that Wednesday, the day after the election through the next week, are all really long days going through and doing our verification and validation processes and doing the final processing of absentee ballots that are arriving after Election Day. And then obviously early voting for the first couple weeks is going to be every single day. So it's really a span of 4 or 5 weeks there where we really don't get much time off at all. So that's kind of what we're doing in those final 5 weeks leading up to Election Day.
And all of that is being done to maintain the accuracy so that if I vote at 4:30 on Saturday, the final day of early voting, and I show up on Tuesday to try and vote again, the poll book is going to say, well, dummy, you voted on Saturday.
Yeah.
So it's all of those steps are being taken behind the scenes in a very short period of time to make sure that the poll books are completely accurate based on everything that's happened up to 5 o'clock on Saturday.
So some concerns and questions we have, I mentioned this, early voting inquiries and questions about locations and start dates, questions about how to register, procedural assistance for mail voting. There's always some little questions about how they fill out the form, and some of those kind of things. Each of you has a packet. You guys requested a packet, so I gave each of you a packet that has the full materials with what we send out. You do get our new sticker if you vote by mail, so we do have that included, which is great. So going into early voting in particular, so we've had some concerns about 2 sites not being open yet, about basically Haymarket and DMV not being open at the start. And this was part of the plan, which was that generally we have not seen a lot of voting in the early weeks at any sites we've had open. About 80% of the voting typically happens during the last 3 weeks. So the first 3 weeks we see about 20% of the voters. The last 3 weeks we see about 80% of the voters. So this is actually more options. There are going to be more early voting days in the new ordinance for this election than there were in the old one. We have about 10 additional site days, and I'll show a chart with that in just a second. But this actually gives us better geographic spread across the county. While we don't have those 2 sites open for 6 weeks, we have 6 sites open for 3 weeks. So more voters in the county are closer to an early voting site. That's really helpful for voters that maybe don't have the transportation options that other voters have as well, that they're closer, that they can use options like bus options, and they have something close by. So we should expect this election to see turnout a little bit lower for the first couple weeks, at least as far as early voting goes. Mail voting has been coming in steady, and then we'll see a lot more during the last 3 weeks, and that's when we know that most voters go out and vote. So here's a comparison. This is the top 10 jurisdictions in Virginia. So just a note about this. So at the start, some people have asked, well, why is the office open and where it is in the county? So the office is required to be open by law. The offices of every county around the state are open for the full 45-day plus period of early voting. So that is required in every jurisdiction. And what you're going to find is that 85% of the jurisdictions in Virginia, they only open that one site for the entire time. So the vast majority of counties only have one site. Now, Prince William County, a number of the counties on here, are larger jurisdictions. So one site is not going to be sufficient to the needs of the voters. And even in some of those smaller counties, they're having to travel a pretty great distance at times to get to an early voting site. So what you can see here is that if you look at they have the population of all these counties, it's listed in order of population, Prince William County being the second largest county in the state. The third column there shows site days, and I think that's the most essential fact here, which is how many days. So if you have one site open for 1 week for 5 days, that equals 5 site days. So if you multiply the number of sites by how many days they're each open, then you get a total of how many site days you have open. And that means at each of those site days, you can process maybe a few hundred voters on a slow day or a couple thousand at a busy location. So we have 136 site days. That's up about 10 site days, I believe, from the previous ordinance, so it's up a little bit higher than what it was in the past. You'll also see that compared to Virginia Beach and Loudoun, which are the same size as us, or just a tad smaller than us, we have the same number of site days as they basically do combined. So we have a lot of options. Fairfax has more, but Fairfax is more than twice our size. They're the largest county in the state by far. But you can see our site days are higher than any other county except for Fairfax. We only have one site open for the total time. There's a few that have 2 or 3, but like I said, most around the state only have 1 for the whole time. We open up 5 satellite sites outside of Fairfax. There's 4 localities on there that have 5 sites, so we're among the highest in that. If you look at the total number of weekend days, we have 5. There's only 3 counties that have that many, us, Fairfax, and Arlington. Everyone else is mostly at 2 and some at 3. If you look at the counties that have Sunday voting, we are in the yes column. We're one of the five of the top 10 counties have Sunday voting. We are one of those. And if you look at the satellite start date, 10/13. Only 2 counties open earlier than that. Chesapeake opens some of their sites on the 7th. Richmond opens their sites on the 7th, but they only have 2 sites. So compared to the other really large sites, we're opening on average about a full week before any of them, and we have as many or more sites than they do. So I certainly understand the concerns, and I think that there are things that maybe we learn and that the supervisors might want to take action and change something for a presidential election. I probably wouldn't recommend it for a different type of election because we just haven't seen the numbers. I mean, we had days during the primary in the first couple weeks. I think in the second week on a Tuesday, we had one day where we had 31 voters total at 3 sites. That's the equivalent of roughly 1 voter per hour at each site. So it just has not panned out that most voters don't want to vote in the early part of early voting. But what we do have is more options than most of these counties on the whole and in the later part of early voting. So I've had some questions about that. I've sent some emails out to some of the elected officials that have sent in, inquiries about that. I am always bothered by when people say you're disenfranchising voters. I think people throw that word around way too easily, and they steal what it really means. There are more than enough opportunities, I think, to vote. You have 3 full weeks in Prince William County of all the sites. You can vote by mail. The office is open for the entire time. You can vote on election day. I think that the board has recommended this. This was a staff recommendation. It was approved unanimously by the county supervisors. I think it's a system that works, and I think it makes sense for what we know about voting patterns. But it is a change, and I've experienced with 14 years in elections, anytime you have a change to a polling place. I went to a meeting in DC where we were realigning some of the precincts, and we told one voter that she was going to be voting at the school instead of the church, and she told me that she was being disenfranchised, and she had to walk 2 blocks the other way instead of 2 blocks the one way. So it is something that people are sensitive about. They get accustomed to the polling places and to schedules. Part of what the new ordinance is about is trying to make it so that all of our locations are open every election. The only thing you have to know is what the start date is. But the sites will be the same because we had a lot of confusion about that before. So we get a lot of questions about early voting. That is something that we typically get through all elections, so I just wanted to go into that a little bit more and explain that a little bit more thoroughly at a statistical level and at a kind of a planning level. On our website, we're looking at what our popular pages are this month. About 9,000 unique visitors to our early voting page, about 3,000, more than 3,000 to our sample ballot page, and about 1,400 unique visitors to our mail voting page. Traffic, as we would expect, was up about 600% from what we saw in August when we weren't yet fully into the election process. I think Thalia's done a really great job with updating some of our pages. If you look at our early voting page, not only does it list the locations and the hours, but it's got a map that can be helpful. It's got a calendar up there trying to give some visual opportunities. So we're trying with our materials to make sure that, some people learn better by looking at a list. Some people learn better by looking at a map. Some people learn better by looking at a calendar. So we're trying to make sure that all those opportunities are available for them, and all this information was in our voter guide as well. We also added a dashboard to our homepage. So if you go to our homepage, we're going to keep this updated. It's just high-level data, our total number of voters, the number of mail ballots we've sent out, how many early voters we've had, how many mail ballots have been returned. So you can monitor there what the total turnout is. You can monitor how many, what percentage of our ballots have come back through the mail. So we'll have that throughout the process just to give people some idea about what the numbers are. I think it's good information for the public. We also get a lot of media questions about it, so we have it front and center on the webpage, so they can just go see it whenever it is they need to look that up. Our poll books, we have a new support program. I'm going to talk about this with the fiscal 26 budget as well. So we have a service level agreement with a company called Calvasier. Calvasier is just basically the new Demtech. So they're supporting our poll books, our Demtech poll books, this election and Tally Point. Over the past couple of years, Demtech was a company that was purchased by Civics and absorbed into the Civics family. And Civics was our service provider up until this summer, when our service agreement with them was up. Calvasier has informed the New Country Civics decided earlier this year, I think in the spring, they sent a memo to all the jurisdictions that they were no longer going to be in the poll book game, basically, and they weren't going to be supporting this product after the end of calendar year 2024. And Civics has been so-so on their support, to be honest. They haven't been as good as what we got with Mike Brown, who's the head of Demtech and now the head of Calvasier. So we've transitioned over to them because they've always given us the best support, and it's essentially the same team that we've had supporting this product the entire time. I do want to give praise to John Alvarez. John and Ricky Keach from Loudon and a few other individuals were really key with helping coordinating the states. This was quite a surprise for Civics to send out a memo in spring saying they're not going to support the product anymore. Government timelines for purchasing really take a couple years. And so having that process just thrown at you in the middle of a presidential election year was really frustrating. I think Demtech probably bears some responsibility in that for kind of some of these business decisions that they've made. But also Civics, when absorbing a new product, you wouldn't expect that a year later they would just be then bailing from that product. They basically didn't get a contract with Maryland, and after they didn't get that, Maryland kind of pushed off that contract, I believe, and they just decided it wasn't, enough of a profit center for them. Anyway, I just wanted to praise John because he's been one of a few individuals who's really helped a lot. There's a lot of counties that use the Demtech poll book, and he has been an expert on that product and has really done an excellent job with helping not only our jurisdiction transition, but other jurisdictions around the state. And there's been a variety of directions people have gone with this. Some people have gone with Calvasier. Some people still are under contract with Civics through the end of the year. We didn't feel like they were as helpful as an organization that was not as familiar with the product. Some counties have gotten rid of their Demtech poll books altogether and gone over to other products. I don't really think that was an option for us, but we'll talk about that as part of the fiscal 26 budget. I wanted to note that there's been a lot of integrity concerns over the past couple years, and note a few of those. We've had a number of things related to voter registration. We've had people ask questions about multiple voters on the list. People have questions about non-citizens voting. Those things we have reviewed very thoroughly. We have identified any problems that were there, made any modifications that we needed to with the voter registration process. We've added a challenge process. And I think that we don't see anything that's a significant issue in that area. On the non-citizen front, we looked at 162 individuals that were listed as non-citizens in the VERA system. 43 of those have voted. We looked at all 43 of those. Every single one of them had verified their citizenship previously, some by as many as 5 times. And they all had social security numbers, and we had to cancel them because of state protocol, but we also didn't see any issue where they were had done anything illegal. I think what's worth noting is that non-citizen in the VERA system does not mean someone is dispositively not a citizen. It is a categorization that largely comes from the DMV transfer of data. And what it has done, if anything, is more likely trapped a lot of people who are valid citizens who are being canceled from the process. Now, we're talking about a small number of people. I think it was a little over 6,000 people statewide over a couple years. So we're not talking about a lot of people out of 6.3 million. The number who had voted was a very small portion of that, I think only roughly a quarter. So anyway, it's an issue we've explored pretty thoroughly. We took several days earlier this year to look at that issue, myself and Deputy Director Natalia Taylor.
Now, when you get notice or something from Elect saying these 200 people are ineligible non-citizens, then what do you do to reach out to them to verify that, or to make sure that they can register and make sure that they're legally able to vote?
Well, they're sent a notice of cancellation. They have a period of time to respond to that. I believe it's 14 days. And if they respond to it, they confirm their citizenship, then they're kept on the voter rolls. If they don't, then they're canceled. The vast majority of them are canceled because we don't hear back from a lot of them. I think that's kind of evidenced by the fact that 3/4 of them have never voted, shows that it's possible that some of them don't even know that they registered to vote when they went through that DMV process. So unfortunately, the form design from the DMV is pretty bad. It's something that is kind of a universal complaint of GRs, that form could stand to be redone, but that's not something that's within our control. That would have to be a state level decision, and a reporter asked me about this last week, and I said that the relationship between the DMV and the Department of Elections in every state is can be a little bit difficult sometimes, because DMV has their agency goals and the Office of Elections has their agency goals, and so the DMV is forced to kind of adapt to making sure they are including voter registration in their process. It doesn't always work out, as it should, but again, we're talking about an extremely small number of people here. So, and we did find that of the 43 people who had voting history, who were canceled, that I think 26 of them, the majority of them, had re-registered already when we checked. So they corrected that situation. Some immediately in response to that letter, some further down the road. So we've had a lot of questions about voter roll maintenance. We've answered that. We've put together a number of reports. If you look back at the footage from a lot of the different board meetings, and supplemental materials are all posted online. I should note that I don't think there's any other agency that puts all of their stuff online like we do. We have video recordings of all of our meetings. We put all the materials. If you want to go and look at our task list and see how much progress we've made this election to get things ready, you can go do that. It's going to be there from this election. And I don't think there's any other agency around the state, maybe Arlington, that has as much stuff as we do, where we provide all of that information online for people to go view. I know a lot of questions that we've gotten from people this election. We have given them the answer on the phone, but also told them, hey, go to our website, and there's a lot of information on there about security. There's a lot of information about how the process works. We have a whole series called How It Works that kind of explains step by step how mail voting works, how voter registration works, all those kind of things. Those are all on there. Related to that, we had an open house initiative a month ago. Was it a month ago? Seems like a year ago. About a month ago, we had an open house. We had about 300 voters come through, check out the process. We had a lot of really good feedback from people. They really enjoyed it. It's definitely something we will be doing again, especially in an off year when we have a little bit more time. I think gives people a real opportunity to see, how we maintain our voter rolls, how we report results on election night. So we'll be continuing to do things on that front and some other voter education and transparency initiatives to continue that work. I talked with y'all last week about a new product called Ballot Verifier that we've been in talks with that company about. So that's something that we are, working on, and sending a letter to the Attorney General about that. There will be a risk limiting audit after this election. There is both a ballot, there's two methods. One's the batch method and one is the ballot sample polling method. But both methods are going to be used. One by the statewide Senate race and another for the one of the House races will be selected as well. So there will be a risk limiting audit after the election. The public is welcome to come observe that process as well. That'll probably be here. So a lot of different integrity things. I would note as well that our most concerning problem really from my side of the table is misinformation. We do recommend to voters to seek out official sources. So when you, if you're having someone telling you that they've heard this as a rumor, they saw this on social media, you should go to our website, go to official sources, and look and see if that information is true. Some of that is innocent. Some of that is organizations that are trying to register people, trying to get people to vote by mail, that are sending them wrong information. Sometimes they send out applications to mail ballots. They send them to people that already have a mail ballot. It causes confusion. Sometimes it is organizations that are intentionally doing that. Sometimes it is foreign adversaries. Russia and Iran, in particular, are putting a lot of information on social media to try to fuel chaos and try to fuel misunderstanding and to try to create civil instability in our country. So I want to make a note that spreading those conspiracy theories and wrong information, I hear a lot of complaints about people don't have confidence in the system. All right, we hear that. We've had open house initiatives. We've put our results online. We've done a lot of things as a county that not every county in Virginia is doing, that not a lot of counties in the country are doing. And we've expanded that. But at the same time, you can't complain about a lack of confidence in the system while you are actively degrading confidence in the system when the information that you are putting out there does not lack factual basis. When it is based on conspiracies, when it is disingenuous, that lacks integrity. So that's a message to everyone here, everyone that watches this, that you can't complain about the problems with the system while also not being engaged with the system in an honest and fair way. So that is a message from me on that. And I put something in our voter guide too, a message there that talked about civility and how people treat each other in there so that when people are going to the polls, and thankfully I've seen this, it's been very good so far. You know, people are wearing their t-shirts and stuff in for both sides, and I don't see people griping at them or making comments towards each other. They're behaving in a civil manner. They're going about their business and voting. We should all be able to go out and vote in peace and tranquility and be able to have a good process and a process we have confidence in. So I invite people to learn about that process. We have a ton of resources on our website. You can watch all of these meetings. We post all of the materials from the meetings. There's not much more we can do to deliver that to people. But it does take people making sure that when you read something online, before you just pass it along, you should consider whether it's factual or not, whether it's real or not. So I think that's important for our social stability. All right, so next is budget prep for fiscal 26. So this is largely going to be our sole initiative next year. It'll probably be a multi-year initiative, is to replace our scanners and our ADA machines. Those are at the end of our life cycle. And then the board asked me to look at contingency for our poll books because of some of the instability with our contractor in that and some of the movement on that from company to company. We do want to be prepared if that's something where we need to make a change. So regarding the poll books, the board recommended to pursue funds in case of any further issues. So we have a service level agreement. I feel confident in our poll books for this election. But if our vendor makes additional business decisions that undermine the stability of that process and that put us in a position of uncertainty, you know, there's been a little bit of scrambling the last couple months to make sure everything was locked up and ready for this election, and I don't want to be in that position. So we're looking at options. We're going to have a couple vendors come in over the winter after this election, and I've requested contingency funds for the fiscal 26 budget. I talked to OMB about this a week ago at our budget prep meeting for fiscal 26. So while that's not necessarily going to be an initiative that will fund, they're going to set aside probably about $1 million in case we need to replace our poll books That way we have the funds available if that's something that we need to make a move on, so.
And the vendors that are coming in, any equipment that you purchase has to be certified by Elect before anyone buys it.
Yeah, yes, it has to be certified equipment. So for those of you that don't know, there are only really a handful of companies across the country that make a lot of these equipment. There are more companies that make the poll books, but especially the scanners and the ADA machines, only a handful of companies that we use. So we're looking at Hart. Hart is our current vendor for our scanners and ADA machines. And we're looking at them as the likely vendor that we would go to for this budget initiative. So a couple things about that. We're at the 10-year replacement cycle right now. So the analogy that someone made is that it's like old tires. Do we still have tread on the current scanners and the current ADA machines? Yeah, they'll probably be fine for a couple more years. But we also don't want to wait, we don't want to use them to the point where you have a blowout or a problem. If all of a sudden one election we start having 10 or 20 machines that are breaking down, having problems, we don't want to reach that point. 10-year replacement cycle is generally the recommendation. We would have gotten, the plan for this would be to get these machines starting roughly calendar 26, so at the start of 2026 in January. And we would be right around 11 years at that point on our current machine. So we've been monitoring that. John's been tracking, how many of our equipment, what percentage of our equipment has problems. It's still a very low percent. It's still within the sort of standard percent that we would expect in any given election when you have, hundreds of pieces of equipment and they're being used sometimes thousands of times. But we don't want to get to the point where our old tires are out of tread. So the positive to this is that there's a new standard from the EAC, the VVSG 2.0 standards. Has a lot of security enhancements. It has a lot of audit features that are improvements. It has a lot of ADA functionality that are upgrades. So the VVSG standards are on the EAC website. If you're interested in, you can go see all of the different features and functions that the new VVSG standard 2.0 would have. Hart is right now on pace to be the first VVSG 2.0 approved. They're at least the first ones with their application. They're going through that process right now. So we would be an early adopter because what we don't want is if we're going to replace all of our equipment and it's going to cost a couple $1 million, we don't want to get the 2017 Honda Civic. We want the 2026, newer version of that. So we'd be one of the first adopters of the 2.0 systems. These machines are considerably lighter. That's very good news for our officers. Those machines are very heavy at about 26, water malfunction, at about 26 pounds, I think. The new ones are about 15, so they're a lot easier to manage. The new system also includes the ability to use ranked choice voting. So that is an option that the supervisors could decide at some point to implement for local elections. I don't know if they will or not. There haven't been any really substantive conversations about that, but I know there's a few board members that are kind of interested in looking at it. So we'd want to have a system that was capable of that. And again, I noted the implementation plan would be somewhere around January 2026 for this. Okay. Any questions from you all about the budget prep? Election preparation?
No, thank you.
Nope. Okay, so next order is new business, appointment of election officers.
All right, so you all have a list there. Now, I don't think we got any feedback from the chairs on this, but your guys' policy is that if we don't have, any objections to them, that we'll go ahead and implement them. One note related to that too is if there were objections, they can be examined after the election as well, because the 2-year cycle will start again at the start of next year. So in December, we'll be sending the party chairs the full list of all the officers so they can go about reviewing them and seeing if they want to object to anybody or if they want to make any appointment changes. So we have I think maybe 25 or 30 Republicans on there, but they're in some key districts in the east part of the county where we often have trouble getting more Republican officers. So we thought we might be done last month with appointments, but we thought there's some individuals in these groups that would really be helpful. And there's also one change of party that was requested by the party chair, Republican party chair.
Did you hand out the list? Did you hand out that list?
Well, it's not, yes, we always mail the list to the party chairs, but,
Yeah.
There were no more on the table if you handed it out.
oh, no, I didn't post it up there. Well, we'll post it online with the supplemental materials.
Thank you.
Okay. How long ago did you send them out to the party chairs?
A week ago.
Okay. All right.
How many new officers? About 120,
I
25?
think it's 123. 123.
And we still have enough time for training, plugging these people in
Oh, yeah.
for November. That's
Yeah. I mean, we won't be able to use them all. We're pretty full on Democrats at this point, nonpartisans. We have enough Republicans that we're in balance right now, but we're always short of backup options if officers drop out. So,
And also too, we have a critical date coming up, which is the training deadline, October 7th. If we have any election officers that aren't signed up for training, we're gonna remove them. And right now, that list is about 55 people.
yeah,
So this will give us more inventory.
yeah. Thanks, Sean.
Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept these 123 new election officers.
I'll second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So these will be approved, and then, they'll be in the pool available if we need them for Election Day. All right, next is review of the officer assignment policy.
Okay, so the officer assignment policy, this was implemented, I think about 2 years ago initially, and this is just a few minor changes to that. One, it clarifies that you all have been doing 2-year terms on the odd years for the officers. So it previously said 1-year terms, so this modifies it to 2-year terms. This also extends the time for chairs to review the officers, so we're changing the time period of when we send it to them from 7 days to 10 days to give the chairs a little bit more time to review this. We're also asking for getting it 2 days before the meeting, because right now we get it the day before the meeting. Often it could be difficult, especially if like a Monday meeting like today, to get everything finalized. So gives us another day, gives the chairs another 2 days to look at it. In some cases, that might mean another weekend, so that would be helpful. This accounts for staffing emergencies. It makes a note for replacing officers in the last week if there's an emergency where we have a chief dropout. It notes putting nonpartisan officers in those places if there's somebody that can't fill that role that's a partisan in that precinct. And then it expands the reason for officer removal. So there was a lot of real specified things in there for officer removal but there wasn't really one for just unprofessional behavior and some of the things that we've observed at times. And, I need the ability to, if somebody is acting really rude towards the voters or just being unprofessional with their fellow officers, I need the flexibility to be able to remove them, and the board needs the flexibility to be able to get rid of them from our officer pool. It doesn't happen that often. I think since I've been here, we've only had about, I don't know, a dozen officers or so removed. That's a lot better than my time in DC where we had to get rid of a couple thousand, but I'm not joking, 2,000 officers. I was very liked by a lot of our officers and not very liked by some. So, but, you have to put in standards for people to not only be following the code and the laws that they have to follow, but also to be, behaving in ways that are serving the voters and being good teammates and some of that kind of thing. So
So we have to sign this and mail this to elect or something?
no,
No, it's just
this is just your guys. This is just your guys' policy.
We're going to adopt this policy?
Yeah. Yeah, it was the initial implementation, I think it was September of 2022 was the initial implementation. So there's just a few tweaks to that. Give the chairs a little more time, expand the reasons for removing officers if they're, acting up, and then modifying it to the 2-year term. So I think most of the stuff that was drafted out by the chairs and the board at that time and all the feedback process we went through was pretty good, but, a couple tweaks every once in a while.
You have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we officially adopt this policy.
Okay, I will second that. Let me commend, again, Eric and Dina and the whole election officer team. So this policy came about because of, frankly, over the years, there were fewer and fewer people that signed up to be Republican election officers. And so the staff was forced to use nonpartisan people to serve as a chief, assistant chief, or to fill out the precinct. And the code says, to the extent practicable, we have an even balance. And this policy came about because of those concerns. And the policy gave the chairs an opportunity that in my history, none of them had ever had before or used. So the code required that the chairs of the political party submit names to us, to the elections office every year, of people to serve as election officers. And we never, maybe a handful of people over 17 years. And so the office we were doing all the recruiting, we were doing the assignments. And we reached a crisis point where, we were actually sued by the Republican committee in 2022 because we didn't have the precise balance. And so this policy not only encouraged or required the office to do everything they could to reach out to make sure we have an even balance. And Eric and his team, again, went above and beyond what the code actually requires them to do, actively recruiting people to serve as Republican election officers throughout Prince William County so that we had a balance, especially for chief and assistant chief and leadership. And for the last several elections, we have had almost an identical or, one short, complete balance, Democrat and Republican, in the leadership at every precinct for those elections. And this gives the chairs of the two political parties the opportunity to sign off on someone who they may claim to be a Democrat, but if the Democratic chair has never heard of them, they don't want them representing Democrats, then they can object, and that person will be listed as nonpartisan. But I know that we have struggled, and I know there are lots and lots of jurisdictions around Virginia that aren't complying with the code because they simply don't have the number of officers that can make an even balance. And so they're using nonpartisan people to fill those vacancies. But I think we've made a major step forward in the last several years, and this policy has helped, and it's put the chairs on notice that they have some responsibility in this area. So I will. Do you have any other comments? Anything?
No comments. All
Okay.
in favor, say aye.
Aye. So that passes. So we will continue this policy, provide the chairs of the parties in December the list of people for officers going forward, and so we've made considerable progress on this area.
Yeah, just a note, we start this election with one chief and assistant chief of each party, and that's continued to be in balance because we have quite a few. I think we have 3 or 4 dozen backups in those positions. Am I correct on that number, Tina? Yeah, so we have quite a few backups for leadership, which is great. Took time to build to there. And we started off this election with actually 2 more Republicans overall than Democrats for our total officer pool. I think around 400-ish of each. So that compares to 2020 when we had 2.5 Democrats for every Republican, and none of those were actually approved and reviewed by the party at that time. So what that actual ratio was probably significantly worse, but we've done targeted recruiting for several years now of to get reach out to Republicans in particular, and also Spanish speakers, to make sure that we're serving our voters in ways that are compliant with the law and meeting best practices. So that's it.
Okay. Before we do public comment, and there's a sign-up sheet, anyone who wants to make public comment, please sign that sheet, and we'll have, each person will get 3 minutes. Just quickly before that, so could you do a quick review of the cure process and what's involved and, you know, how this process works?
So when the ballots are returned, it's a team in our office that looks at each ballot 3 times to verify the information on it. The most common thing is that people just leave their social security number off, or there's some material omission where some piece of information is left off of the ballot envelope that requires to be cured before it can be processed. So the team identifies those, and they go into a log. That log is shared with the party chairs at regular intervals, so they have a sense of how that's going. So far, it's been very good, this election. We normally have a cure rate, or a need for cure of about 3 to 4% of our ballots. It's only been 1.5% this election. A couple years ago, we had a cure rate of when voters were curing their ballot situations that was around 40, 45%. That's now north of 60%, and I'm hoping for 70% this election. Our voter services team has built some tools to automate emails to those voters if they have an email address on file. So they get emails to remind them, they get calls. So any voter that goes onto that cure log, they're getting multiple communications from us via phone calls, emails, to notify them of the situation. We send them a letter letting them know that that there was an issue with their ballot, so they have that. And there's an affidavit they get sent. Most of the cures can be done with the affidavit. They just need to confirm their year of birth, their social security number. Sometimes it's just they put it in wrong. They'll say year of birth and they'll put, the February 8th or whatever. So that's most of those issues. But thankfully, we've seen a very low percentage requiring cure this time, which is really good. I think partly that's just, we redesigned our envelopes a couple years ago, so I think it's a better process than it was. But also, I think people are getting used to the Social Security and year of birth requirement was it last November that was first? I think it was last November was the first election where that happened. So if you're a male voter, especially if you're on the permanent list, which is a good portion of our male voters, that you've become familiar with that now, and you know what you're supposed to do. So maybe the individuals who made a mistake the last time and got the letter the last time have corrected that mistake this go around. So that's really nice to see. We want to do everything we can to make sure that anyone who's trying to vote, gets that voting process done. We can't control that if they don't send back the affidavit or if they don't correct it. And there's always a certain percentage of people that don't do that. But I think we want to make that as small of a group as we can. So if we have half the number of cures and we're getting a good portion of them more cured, then that means more ballots are coming through from voters who intended to vote.
Okay, so public comments. Do we have the sign-in
I
sheet?
think we have the sign-in sheet.
And because the door is locked, we can't have our fancy podium for people.
Anyone who's speaking today will come up and give this call, stand right here. I'll make you up.
You can turn the,
Okay, all right, so, all right, so the first name is Elizabeth Block.
Okay, is this on? Oh, okay, very good. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Block from Manassas, Virginia. Eric in London, I received your email response to my question, which comes from observers who are U.S. citizens and Virginia registered voters. My emailed question was on the observation of ballot chain of custody and early voting. Of course, we just have Lee Avenue open right now. So the observers, I guess are being told that the Lee Avenue location fears that the authorized reps will see the ballots and how people voted when after the close of the polls, and they want to see the empty ballot box and any further chain of custody documents. And we believe those fears are actually exaggerated. So what I emailed was a question from our authorized reps, and I mentioned the Attorney General 2021 opinion that's commonly referenced by Elect that early voting locations, absentee voter locations, and general registrar's office are polling places or precincts as defined in Virginia Code 24.2-101. And in 2022, Elect also sent a letter to Fairfax County Office of Elections referencing A.G. Herring's opinion that general registrar's offices are also precincts. So authorized representatives on Election Day can see basic ballot chain of custody. They're not staring at ballots, but they can certainly see the ballots, from a distance removed and placed in their secure containers. And that's really what our authorized reps are looking for. Maybe scanner one's ballots are in this pouch, scanner two's ballots are in the second pouch. Maybe there's a security seal or something and a piece of paperwork that keeps track of that. They're not wanting to look at the ballots themselves. So I was looking for some resolution to that. And I just mentioned this because it seemed I guess you had a long day, Eric, when you responded. So I appreciate a reconsideration on how the Lee Avenue is handling that matter. The second thing I just want to point out to the public, because this board and office doesn't have anything to do with this particular matter. Eric mentioned earlier the various forms of audits, the ballot polling method and the batch comparison that have been approved by the state board. The public should know that the legislature, which is run by the Democrat Party on both houses, made two significant changes in the budget, Governor Youngkin's budget. The first was, and the governor did not remove these changes, so it became law. And the first was to not allow funds to be spent on the audit of a presidential race. And the second was to require a 4/5 majority of the state board to approve any audit, or at least the type of audit, of any election. So the public should know that they should go to townhall.virginia.gov, I believe, and go to the Board of Elections and the State Board of Elections. All their meetings, their schedules are right there. You can take part in those meetings so you understand the process of the types of audits that are approved. And we also believe that Virginia voters should be rather outraged that something was placed in the budget and the governor didn't remove it. He feared an argument over getting his budget approved, and so he did not remove those particular items, and it became law. And we believe Virginia voters should be rather outraged at this and keep that in mind when voting in this and following elections. And we are very much supportive of the batch comparison method for risk limiting audits, and that those are to be available to every office of elections in the future.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Next up is Kim Brace.
Oh.
There you go, sorry. Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Kim Brace. I'm a longtime poll worker since 2008. I used to be Eric in a previous lifetime with the county. Luckily, I didn't lose hair like Eric. Mine just turned gray, you know. Yeah. I wanted to report to you, I am chief, been assigned chief to Precinct 102, which is Cedar Point Elementary School, which is up north in the county. I actually visited there on Friday as an early site to see, since I hadn't been there before. It's not my home precinct. In talking with the principal and the main person of contact in the polling place, they made note that indeed school will not be held on Tuesday, election day, but they did note that as of right now, the teachers are still expected to be in the precinct. And as such, in an elementary school, the parking spaces out front are all filled by teachers' cars. In previous years, or at least one year, the school board has designated that as a teacher time off day so that they wouldn't have to report to school. And so I wanted to raise it with the board to see whether or not that can be questioned to the school board of whether or not they could designate that so that they could have a less filled parking lot for the voters.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you there. Next.
Next, we have Arlene Brown.
There you go.
Good morning. My name's Arlene Brown. I live in Haymarket, Virginia. And a number of voters have expressed concerns about security of absentee ballots. We believe their concerns would be allayed in part, if they were encouraged to sign up for ballot tracks or to deposit their ballot physically at the voting precinct. We believe that this action might be encouraged by doing a public service announcement, by possibly using any kind of delivery system that we have to the voters, such as the voter guide or the How It Works, in order to direct voters or encourage voters to use ballot tracks if they are sending their ballot in. A lot of people are a little concerned about the postal system and all the handoffs that happen at the postal system. So, who's next?
All right, great. Thanks very much. Next up, we have Stephanie Chartrand.
You have to push that in.
Okay. I hope I'm using this correctly. Stephanie Chartrand, Gainesville Magisterial District, almost 40 years. I've seen this election process over the decades. So I'm Assistant Chief of Elections at the River Oaks Precinct down in the Woodbridge area. I've done that a few years. It's been a good experience. The one concern I have with this election in particular, and a request, is that a standard operating procedure be prepared for the chief's booklet and also perhaps a copy put into the paper poll book in the event that we are not the process using electronics to run the election is interrupted. So doing this and providing this would help us have confidence that we are executing a paper election properly. It would instill confidence in the people that are working with us at the precinct, and also confidence in any public that happens to be in the precinct should this event happen. So The request again is for the Office of Elections to prepare just a standard operating procedure to run the election should the electronics become unavailable, interrupted, whatever, for whatever reason. You will just give us assurance during what would be a very stressful time to carry on the election process without the use of the electronic tools.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It could be easily done into the chief's booklets or also as an attachment onto the paper poll book, because that's what we'll be reaching for should that situation happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we have all become so dependent upon technology that we have to be prepared for that unwelcome
yes.
situation where the technology fails.
Yes, and in the training, the chief training, they said, hey, use the paper poll book, but I'm not aware that there's any step-by-step procedure to help us in that stressful moment. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Jeff Fuller.
Good morning. Well, I'm so glad my smiling face is going to be on the camera. Eric, this relates to the point you made about the 42 ballots or 43 ballots that you mentioned. I just want to let you know I was curious to find out what happened to those names. So I got the list of names from Epic, who did the original analysis that I was aware of. And I ran those 42 names against two different databases. The most recent database I ran it against is the one that the GOP has, which is probably dated at least a month behind what you have, I would expect. I was surprised to find that out of the 42, only 2 appeared back on the registered database, but they appeared back with a new voter ID and no voter history, which I thought was odd. So I might be missing something. It might be that as a matter of routine, everybody that gets put back on has a new voter ID and their voter history is erased. I'm not asking a question. I'm just saying that may be the case. But you indicated that there were 26 that had re-registered, and I'm surprised to find it may be that I have to look for them under a new voter ID. If that's the case, I'll do that. But I wanted to track those people down and just be comforted in knowing that, in fact, they have, if they're gone and they never come back, that means they were non-citizens who voted illegally. And that's my concern. If non-citizens vote illegally, I hope the Electoral Board will provide guidance on what happens. And are they going to be referred to the state's attorney, the Commonwealth attorney? Are they referred to the AG? So I'm happy to hear, well, I'm disappointed to hear that there's a process that would take people off the rolls, but wrongly. That's not good. But if they are taken off and they don't come back, I would be curious to know, what do we do? Is it okay? So, Eric, I think you're comforted to know your position is that it's all okay. I just would like to be assured of that. Because we just don't, I can't tell you how many times I've been asked, what about these illegals that are voting or non-citizens that are voting? We have people with non-citizens driver cards, privilege cards, who walk into a precinct, and we have to give them a ballot if they sign the form that says they are who they are. So any light you can shine on that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. So next up we have Tom Morkey.
There you go, sir.
My name is Tom Morkey. I've never done this before. I'm an election officer. I've been trained. I'm an EPS now, Equipment for Provisional Specialist. I've had the early voting training this year. I've had the leadership training this year. I'm working the election. I'm working about half of the early voting sites. My concern is that we still haven't figured out why. I've been recruited by one of the parties to be one of their poll watchers, by their election integrity chairman for this county. And from his mouth to my ears, let's see if I got this right. I'm not going to give you the whole thing. This is a quote. And it goes to what you were saying about you spread the conspiracy theories, don't complain about them. This is a quote from his mouth to my ears. As we all know, the left is actively trying to recruit voters to vote illegally. I've got a verbatim transcript. I won't labor you with that. This is the summary. George Soros money will be used to pay well-connected illegals, well-coached illegals, pardon me, $100 each to show up to vote using the names of people who seldom vote that Democrats pull from voter logs. They will be coached to state that they are an infrequent voter with a name that sounds Hispanic. They will say that they do not have any ID. They will then be given the ID confirmation statement to complete under penalty of perjury. They'll complete that using the information they've been well coached to present. He kept saying well coached. They'll be given a ballot. They'll fill out the ballot for all Democratic candidates. They'll then take a cell phone photo of the ballot, cast the ballot, then go to their Democratic handler to show the photo and collect $100 from George Soros. This is the chairman of a political party in this county actively recruiting poll watchers to watch what we do. I'm an EPS from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m., as you all know. It's hard to get that precinct up and running smoothly. You got to sync the poll books. You got to run the zero tapes on the scanner. You got to put the signs out. You got to do all that stuff. I got kicked out of one of their 6 election poll worker trainings. They invite me, I go. Because I questioned Governor Youngkin on some of his misrepresentations. I got kicked out 15 minutes into probably an hour's worth of training for this election integrity gig. I thought, okay, that's the end of it, thank God. The next day I get an email with a blank authorization letter from a political party saying, thank you, you're now an authorized poll watcher. I got kicked out of the meeting, and now I'm an authorized poll watcher. My concern is it doesn't have an original signature from Jacob Alderman, chairman of the Republican Party. It doesn't have my name on it. I'm supposed to fill in the blank, present this to the poll workers, say, let me in so I can watch what you're doing. My one question to you is, if at 5 o'clock in the morning 20 people show up with a fill-in-the-blank authorization letter, do I have to let them in? I will if you tell me to. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next up is Carol Chakowski.
Okay, my name is Carol Zakowski. I live in Gainesville, Virginia. Can all of you here in the back hear me? Because I was having a problem hearing the last speaker especially, and I was very interested in what he said. But I have a couple of things to say. I was elected as the State Central Committee for the 10th District last April. So I'm not only representing Prince William County, I'm representing the 10th District. But first of all, I want to say that Electa's now announced that during absentee ballot processing, the general registrar does not have to confirm the 5 data elements that are correct before opening the ballots. But the method is not, that was being used, is the way I understand it, is still being used by Eric and his office, which we sincerely appreciate that. We would like you to continue that, and we'd like you to party authorized representatives to be able to observe this process. And as the second check is the first time a non-employee of the general registrar sees the ballot, this process should remain in place, and recommend the election board publish a policy to this effect. That's my first comment. But then, second comment I have is I've heard that at least one person in Loudoun County, and I understand they're getting their ballots printed in Pennsylvania now. I don't know if we're still using the state of Washington, but one person got 2 absentee ballots in her name. So are we checking on that here in Prince William? Do we have that happening in Prince William? I don't know, but I'm asking Eric to please check on it and the election board to make sure that that's not happening. Another thing that I'm asking about is something that was brought to my attention by a Loudoun County person again, and this is regarding the driver's privilege card. Are you familiar with the driver's privilege license that is issued to some people? And it's my understanding that the governor has only removed less than 7,000 people from our polling books. But there have been almost 120,000 or maybe over 120,000 of these special driver's licenses that have been issued by the DMV in Virginia. So to me, 7,000 versus 120,000 is very few people. Now, I know that there are people that stand at the DMV registering people, and also DMV registers people. So are we checking, what are we using to check against these DMV special privilege cards that have a small little identification on them, a number 9, and then up in the right-hand corner it says federal restricted, personal limits apply. Federal limits apply, I'm sorry. Federal limits apply, I'm not seeing it well here. It's on my phone. But anyway, are we checking, are we doing anything to check and make sure that these people are not registering, or not voting? Because in the Prince William Guider's book for the election officers, it states, this individual may vote a regular ballot if they sign an ID confirmation statement, or must vote a provisional ballot if they will not sign the statement. Now, I've witnessed provisional ballots being processed. Who is checking that? Who is checking to see that these ballots, if they signed a confirmation statement, do they have that type of ID, but they didn't show it? They could be going in there and voting with just a utility bill. I know that the regulations allow a utility bill with the address, if it's in the registration book, they allow that as an ID. So they could be not using this special license and yet voting. What are we doing to check against the DMV records to show that they are not voting?
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, can I have one more?
Very quickly.
Okay, absentee balloting from overseas. I've been notified that especially one party is really trying to get people to vote from overseas, and I've been told, and I'm asking you, is there an ID that's required from absentee voting overseas? What is checked for that? That's all I'm asking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Mike Wydrow.
Good morning. Eric, you and I have met multiple times in LNA testing, and every time I brought something to your attention as far as security and technical issues, you've been very receptive, and I very much appreciate that. One thing I'd like to bring to your attention is what we're doing in our government agencies. I have 30 years experience in software engineering. I manage a team. I have a Security Plus certification, and which is one of the highest security certifications for working and protecting CUI, controlled unclassified information, which is an element of sensitive information. And I'd like to make a recommendation for your office, in your registrar office, where you do curating. Because of my background, I'm making a recommendation, and that is we have to follow NIST standards, specifically NIST 800-171. And the reason for this is because of insider threat. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, insider threat, we trust our people who are cleared, who go through the process. They're good people. I know them personally. But that is not how we operate in our government agencies for protecting COI information. I'll tell you why. CISA under the DHS defines insider threat as the threat that an insider will use their authorized access intentionally or unintentionally to do harm to the department's mission, resources, personnel, facilities, etc. Insider threat under DOD is the #1 concern of our security agencies, and our government customers are requiring the highest level of certifications. Security Plus and or CISP are the most common. I recommend to John that he get Security Plus, and I can help with that. I can give you reference material. Professor Messer online is one of them. Insider threat indicators, unexplained financial gains, and the following would be present in audit logs that you could capture. Excessive data downloads, unauthorized access attempts, connecting to unpermitted systems. These are audit logs that our DOD comes in, DCSA, DCMA, they come in and they review our audit logs, so I'd recommend that. Job dissatisfaction, we don't always know what's going on in the human nature. We don't know what's going on with people's lives. Could be a divorce, could be a bribery, we don't know. So we always want to be aware that we have to protect ourselves and keep each other accountable. How in the world does a trusted and cleared staff become a threat? Through social engineering. In fact, methods employed by hackers to gain the trust of a person. Here's some examples. An average business organization faces over 700 social engineering attacks annually. Also, 90% of all data breach incidences target the human element, emotional or otherwise, to gain access to sensitive business information. An example, ransomware actors have contact with people inside of an organization and bribe them with cryptocurrency, which is happening more often, which literally earns the attacker millions of dollars.
All right, could you wrap it up, please?
Sure. How do we solve this? Our government agencies recommend through NIST, separation of duties is a NIST policy. We have zero trust environments such as AWS, our government cloud environment, zero trust. We only give specific accesses to those. Both internal and external review, we have DCMA, DCSA, DOD designates third parties, and we have customers watch our operations, but we protect them from the sensitive data unless they have a need to know. And then finally, this is why I'm recommending, Eric, I'll just summarize, that you at least have a third party representative viewing the process. It's a matter of just helping you help your team. I really appreciate it.
All right.
Can I ask a quick question? Mike,
Yeah.
what was, you cited a NIST standard, a number?
Yes.
Can you repeat what that number was?
800-171.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank
All
you.
right, thanks very much. Next up, Edgar Gonzalez.
Good morning. My name is Edgar Gonzalez, and I'm a resident of Prince William County since 1986. And first of all, let me say that we appreciate the year effort to demonstrate to voters how the election is conducted relating to precinct operations. This was a very successful transparency event. We have had several voters ask how the voter information is checked and validated for absentee ballots. Based on Mike Whitworth's recommendations, we would like to recommend the Electoral Board to develop a policy for the GR to conduct a walkthrough event and publish a video of the process on an annual basis. That's all. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Next up, Patricia Cooney. All right, she's passing. So the final name, Gina Ashley. Good morning.
Good morning. My name's Gina Ashley, and I'm from Woodbridge. So currently, we have election officers check the absentee ballots, and this is during the pre-processing, and we'd like to keep that in place. It's been brought to our attention that the State Board of Elections has announced that during absentee ballot processing, that the general registrar does not have to confirm the 5 data elements that are correct before opening the ballots. This is referring to the method employed by the general registrar that has the absentee, while the absentee ballots are being reviewed. It's separated from an envelope, scanned by the staff, and then secured for storage by the clerk of court. The party authorized representatives are able to observe this process. We would like this to continue because as the second check is the first time a non-employed general registrar sees the ballot, the process should remain in place. We recommend that the Electoral Board publish a policy that just keeps this in place. We like this process. So, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for what you're doing, too.
All right. Is there anyone else that would like to provide public comment that didn't sign up on the sheet? Okay, so that will.
Let's go ahead and respond to some of the things
Yeah.
that were asked. 'Cause I think
So
it's
Eric will respond to some of the public comments that we've heard today.
Okay, so we don't usually do this in the board meetings, but I know we're in close proximity to the election, and I know that some of you have questions about different things, so I just wanted to kind of go through. I might not hit on every point you all made, but at least cover sort of the gist of what each commenter noted about. The first comment was from Ms. Block was about chain of custody documents. So, and observers watching, I sent an email noting that the observers are allowed to watch the process. I've seen them watching the process. Now, they can't be right on top of the officers, both for ballot security and also for the secrecy of the ballot, but they are able to see that whole process. There are chain of custody documents. Those documents are all foilable. We store all those. They can be reviewed by the observers. So I've seen the observers seeing that process. So I'm not sure which observers are confused about what they're able to see. Now, once the officers do hand over those documents and the ballots to our staff before they go over to the courthouse, that's exactly the same as what happens on election night. The officers bring the ballots and the documents back to the warehouse, and then we transfer those over to the courthouse once the validation of those efforts has been completed. Mr. Brace noted about checking on schools, and I think that would be a good idea for us to send a letter of reminder to the schools to ask their staff to park in the back of the parking lot. It's the same thing we've done here. I've asked all our staff. You'll see a lot more cars out on the street. That's because we're all parking on the street so that the spots in the lot are available to the voters. So I think we can send a letter just reminding the schools to do that. We can't assure compliance 100% with that, but it's just a sensible thing to ask them to do so that voters don't have to walk as far to get to the voting room. Curbside voting is always available too for voters with mobility issues. Mrs. Brown mentioned the security of mail ballots and directing voters to ballot tracks. We did note that. We have mentioned that to a lot of people. I know it's been a very popular service. Those people that sign up for it love it. We don't have even close to the majority of voters that are getting mail ballots that are signed up for it. But one, it is a way for you to kind of see where your ballot is in the process or when it's on its way in the mail. Two, it's a way for you to assure, it's another transparency thing where you can see exactly where your ballot is in the process. So that's a good thought. We do encourage people to sign up for that. We did include that in the voter guide. Ms. Chartrand mentioned guides if electronics are not working properly. So I know we do have, we were looking it up because I immediately was like, I thought we had all that in there. So we do have a section of the guide that is about what to do when the scanner doesn't work and use the emergency bin. And there's a paper poll book section that's very brief. So it is in there, but I also know that the guide is big and that the training classes, you're covering sort of you're covering as much of it as you can, but you're really focused on the essential components of that. So it is in there. What we also note to our chiefs is as soon as that happens, if you have like a power issue, that's always one of my biggest concerns on election day, is the power goes out for a whole site. The only benefit to that now compared to years ago is that everybody has a flashlight in their pocket, which they didn't used to have. So that's a big plus. But we do, if that happens, we encourage the chief to call us right away so that we can make sure they're doing everything they're supposed to be doing. We can get a staff person out to assist them with that as well. So it is in the guide, but we'll try to note that and we'll talk about that. We're doing a final training session with all the chiefs and assistant chiefs. They're going to have a meeting sort of with me about a week before the election. So that's something I'll add to that agenda to make sure it's emphasized to people so they're prepared for those emergencies. We are in contact. We just talked last week about further discussion about emergency situations. So we're in contact with the county's Emergency Operations Center as it regards to police responses to things. We have a couple outdoor precincts ready. So if we have a precinct that's totally dark and out of power, we can within an hour get a new precinct set up outside with tents and things like that. So we have, backup plans in place on those things. Mr. Fuller mentioned the 43 names. I have to look at this a little bit more. I'm not sure. I will mention this in terms of the names. Individuals should be aware that the list of names of those individuals, we put them out just as in the aggregate as numbers. The list of names for individuals that are canceled for that reason are only supposed to be available to the general registrar and the Department of Elections. So I'm a little concerned that people have those names out there because that is a code violation under the code. So, but we do, I will mention, we do report to the Commonwealth's attorney if there are any issues here. If there are issues with people being canceled identified as non-citizens on the list at the state level, and the state voter rolls are a state resource and technically their ownership, then I think the Attorney General, if they wanted to do something on the wider basis, that would be something for the Attorney General's election integrity team to look at further. But we do report people to the Commonwealth's attorney. I unfortunately got one yesterday that I'm going to have to report. The number that in each election is generally pretty small. Sometimes it's none. Sometimes it's a few. I'm sure in a busier election like this, it'll be more than most. But it is a pretty small number. And I don't think that the issue that people are talking about here, we've looked at it pretty thoroughly. I really do not believe that there is a significant issue with non-citizens out there voting. And certainly from the data of people that have been identified as this, when a very small number of them are even voting, it is pretty tough to attach intentionality to some sort of widespread scheme, as the next commenter, Mr. Morkey, I hope I'm saying that right, commented on. I would note for him, though, we don't control the poll watchers, and the number of observers that is available to come into the precinct at the start of the day is in the guide. So there is a limit on the number of observers that can go in. And I know those letters sometimes are concerning because they're not signed off by the individual, but that's partly a function for the parties where they're having to get dozens or 100 or more poll watchers out there, and it's difficult to sort of communicate directly with all of them. So that is a little bit, that's kind of outside of our department. But I do think that when people are talking about is this a widespread problem? We've researched it thoroughly. There's a lot of studies that have been done on this. There's no evidence that this is a widespread problem. I'm sure it's something that does happen from time to time. Ms. Sarkowski talked about the party representative process. So she talked a little bit about absentee ballots. So let me note this. She said somebody got sent 2 ballots in Loudoun County. Ballots are a one-to-one relationship with voters regardless of how you vote. If you get sent 2 ballots, you can only vote one of them. If you send 2 of them back, then you will be one of the people I will have to send over to the Commonwealth's attorney and refer them. But when someone is processed, the mail ballot team, just like the election day team, has a poll book. So any voter that votes by mail, early voting, on election day, there's a process there by accounting for when someone has voted or has not voted. You can also come into the polling place and vote early voting, let's say, and not bring your ballot with you if you sign a form. That doesn't happen a ton, but it does happen some. So, but there is a one-to-one relationship with ballots. So just because a ballot is out there does not mean it is a concern unless it's used in a way that it shouldn't be used. And if it's used in a way it shouldn't be used, we would track that and we would know that because we would see if someone sent a mail ballot back or not, if somebody's already early voted. And then as noted about provisional ballots, those go to the board after the election for review. So it was also mentioned about the driver's privilege card. Now, we have instructions in our manual about this. We have for a couple of years now. It matches the same direction that's given from the state. You all probably have driver's licenses in your pocket. Is your driver's license valid? Is it suspended? I have no idea. If you show it to me, I would not be able to determine that. And there's the same thing for a driver's privilege card. Under state code, if somebody comes in and they try to give a type of ID that is not valid and it does not work, that voter can then sign an ID confirmation form. So if you object to that process, you should write your state legislature about that. I would note that we have very few of the affirmations. Voters have to sign that confirmation form. We have very few of those in any individual election. They're generally by people that just went to the polling place and forgot their ID. But under law, under the state code, we do have to process that the same way that we would for another situation. If a voter signs that, then they're saying they're a citizen. And I understand the concern about it, but just because someone has a driver's privilege card doesn't mean they got that 2 years ago, they became a citizen 9 months ago, and they're fully, able to vote. So if you have concerns about that, and I've mentioned this before, your state legislator is the right outlet for that. We are following the law as we're supposed to follow it. I'm sure all of us have disagreements at times about what that law should be or should look like, and balancing access to the voting process and balancing election security and election integrity is always a balance that lawmakers are trying to find, and it shifts and it changes over time. Mr. Wydra, thank you for the, I'll take a look at those NIST standards. I should mention the state does have a security standards process that we do. The board has to review that every year. The board sets up an election equipment security policy. They have to review that each year. They do that each year. I think they just did that was that the last board meeting? So they complete that process each year. Part of that process is the staff evaluating something called the less standards, the locality election security standards. Am I right on that? Okay. Stumbled through that acronym. The less standards are more than 150 standards that we have to follow. Some of them include things like audit logs and things like that for our state systems and our state processes, so that if there is an issue, that we have an audit log of who made changes to the voter registration database, for example. If anybody on our staff is doing anything in the voter registration database, it's logged. We know who did it, when they did it, exactly what they did. There's an entire log of that process. That way, if something does improper where they should be terminated for it, we have that option. If there's a legal issue, we have that option. So I'll look at that, those standards. I appreciate that. But I do want people to know that in terms of access controls, in terms of all of our staff has to take security training every month to keep up with the standards. We have to make sure we're following through on the policies that the board sets, the policies that the state sets. So there is a whole suite of standards out there that we have to meet. And it's a challenge every year because sometimes the standards the state has are actually beyond what the county has just as an organization. So our staff actually does more than, say, someone over in Parks and Rec or over at the Planning Commission to make sure that we are as secure as possible, since we have to have a higher level of security in elections. Mr. Gonzalez asked a question about the absentee process and how it worked and praised the open house. So yeah, we will do more of those in the future. Appreciate the feedback on that. We'll do more events like that. It was very popular. It was very well received. We had people who came through who said, I was pretty skeptical about the process before I came in here, and now I see everything that goes into it, and I feel pretty confident about it. So that was nice to hear. We'll be doing more with that in the future. NBC4 did a really great, like 2.5-minute piece on it, so they had that all out there for the public. I did an interview with Fox 5 that just came online a few days ago where I talked about election security with their legal expert, Katie Barlow. So we are sort of doing a lot to sort of help promote and educate the public on how these processes work, because I do think that there's a lot of misunderstandings, and even most of you in the room, or all of you in the room, are pretty invested in this process and have a lot of experience looking at the code. So if some of you in the room aren't sure how some of these things work, then obviously the general public is going to be way behind where you all are. So we are working to try to continue that, educational process. And then the last question was about checking the officers checking the ballots. So we do have a How It Works series online. It takes you through the process of how everything goes from start to finish, from when we mail you a mail ballot, which do come from Washington. K&H prints our ballots, they mail our ballots, they do an excellent job. Their envelopes are top notch, their process is really good. Actually, the only mail issue we've had is they get across the country really quickly. We've had some problems with our local distribution centers in Virginia has been the only point of issue. And we're getting our mail ballots back way ahead of a lot of the other counties. If you look at the statistics right now, if you compare us to Arlington or Loudoun, we have a lot more mail ballots back because our voters got their ballots sooner. So that has worked really well. But when those mail ballots come in, they go to the staff, they document how many ballots are in, they reseal they open the envelope, the part of the envelope that just shows the identification, and they reseal that as an extra seal to make sure that nobody can see anything about the secrecy of the ballot. Those teams then check those ballots 3 times. They do a first check to see, is there anything that's empty here? Because if the social security number field is empty, well, that's going right to cure. We don't even need to go through the verification process. We can just get that started. After that, those teams then look 2 times at each envelope to make sure all the required elements have been completed. Their name and address, their year of birth, their social security number, all of that stuff is on there. And then once all of that is done, that's a preliminary check, and that's helpful for the cure process, because if we know that now, as opposed to when the officer teams start looking at them, then we can help assist those voters with making sure that they correct that issue. Once that is done, those sit in a secure room until the officers go to look at them, and then that is a public process that's observed by authorized observers. Well, not a public process, but authorized observers can watch that whole process, and they are verifying all information except for they can't verify the social security number, and that's just because of the PII that's involved there. That secure information is not available to the officers. So, but it has been verified by our staff, and we're matching up with Elect's guidance on that. And our office was actually one of the ones that flagged that with Elect and talked to them about what process we're going to have to do that, because when this law got passed, there was an issue with what information can be on the poll book and what information is needed to verify that process. So, I appreciate all the the feedback and the questions and concerns, and I hope that helps to answer some of them. I'm sure that, as I noted when I started the job for the first time, I'm sure my answers will not please everybody. I would guess that I'm doing my job pretty well if sometimes they don't please both sides, but we're just trying to make sure that we are compliant with code and compliant with the processes that we are supposed to be, and I think our staff and our team is doing a really good job of that. We document the hell out of everything, and we make sure that the code is followed, because it's a really important election, and we want to make sure that everything is done tip-top, and so far everything's gone very smoothly. So I hope that helps answer some of those concerns.
All right. Do you have anything else, London?
No, Mr. Chairman, I have nothing else at this point. I don't think we have any reason to go into closed session.
You don't have nothing for closed?
I don't have anything unless you guys do.
All right. So we will close public comment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. We will we'll be meeting again one more time before November, so stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Hey, Mike, how you doing? Good to see you.
Hey, I didn't have a lot of time, but I just
Yeah.
wanted to talk to you